Don't know if others can hear the lovely doorbell sound we get as
Yes.
so we're very popular today. Everyone's popping in for afternoon tea. Oh, you've got a hot cup of tea and a biscuit with you wherever you are in the country. I've certainly got mine here, so glad you could join us for the next 45 minutes to have a natter with Frances. So it's 3 o'clock now. I'm just going to leave this PowerPoint up for the next couple of minutes, just for people who are just joining the session. It's just some housekeeping notes to help us run smoothly. And we'll get started. Okay, so hello everybody and welcome to week 9 of the SOA at Home Festival and to this session, Life Lessons Learned in 7 Decades with Frances Kay. Frances, as you may know, is a member of our Carers Network and she's also a business writer. What I'm going to do now, before we get started, I'll just stop this screen share and then you'll see Frances and I more clearly. I've changed us. Another point of housekeeping is that if you're new to Zoom, if you go to the top right hand corner of your screen, you will be able to change the view from gallery view, where you can see everybody, to speaker view, and in that way you just get to see either Frances or myself when we're speaking. As I say, if you do have any questions, do pop them into the chat box. Okay, right. So as I was saying, as you know by now, if you come to any of our festival sessions to this point, they're all free. And we're doing running the festival sessions to help raise funds for our Authors Emergency Fund, which supports authors in financial difficulty due to the health crisis. So if you can spare a few pounds, we've popped the link in the chat box, which goes straight through to our GoFundMe page. We have a target of £5,000 and we're well on the way to achieving that target. So thank you to everybody who's donated so far. I'm Anna Ganley and I work for the SOA and I look after our Carers Network. And that's a network for professional authors who have caring responsibilities for someone who has an illness or a disability, and it provides peer-to-peer support for members. As we've said, you're going to be in listen-only mode, but please do be active on the chat box and put in any comments, questions or queries. We'll keep your video and audio turned off just to help things run smoothly, and hopefully you can see and hear us okay. We'll run the session for 45 minutes, and if you do want to carry on the conversation afterwards, we do have the festival hashtag, which is SOA at Home. So, a brief introduction to Frances. As well as being a business writer, Frances was a full-time carer for her husband who had Parkinson's, and so she's well used to coping with challenging times. In this session, Frances, who is inspiring and eloquent, warm and witty, she will share her 10 life lessons that she's learned through the last 7 decades. And during Frances's career, she's worked in politics, she's worked in the diplomatic service and in law, and she did that before becoming a consultant, in which she's helped individuals and organisations with business development and relationship building. She's written over 35 books. Some of those have included titles such as Successful Networking, Understanding NLP, and Understanding Emotional Intelligence, which is something that I love learning more about. Frances has also edited the Good Retirement Guide, which she did for 10 years for Coke & Page, which is Europe's leading independent business books publisher. So Frances is really well placed to discuss topics, whether it's managing your money, health or property in retirement, making the most of your leisure time, which we have a lot at the moment, or running your own business. So hello Frances, welcome to the SOA at Home Festival. Thank you for taking part in it and coming along to speak with us today. How are you doing at the moment? How's your lockdown experience going?
Oh, lockdown is wonderful. I'm now back in the bubble and I think it's going to be hard labour after 12 weeks of absolute sheer indolence and social isolation, which I really enjoyed, and I'll explain why.
Well,
Thank you.
Very much looking forward to hearing more. We've got 10 life lessons to talk about today. So since time is of the essence, should we dive straight in and talk about number 1?
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Anna. We're told that age brings wisdom. I very much hope that's true. I know, having reached my 70s, I'm still learning. I've been married twice. I had 4 children. I've now got 5 grandchildren. So yeah, I've had a busy life, but I think if someone was going to write a report on my life, the last line would probably read, could have done better. So please don't worry, there is always room for improvement. Coronavirus came along and new lessons had to be learned really rather quickly. Will 2020 be a year of confinement or merely consigned to history as a gap year for many of us? Last week's session, the 9th of June, with Kate Moss was excellent, and we learned quite a lot from her. But I do think that self-care is important at any age, whether you're a writer or a carer or whatever you do. And to do that, maybe it's a good idea to start by knowing yourself. Accept yourself as you are. And that way, perhaps other people will accept you too. I'll just give you a bit of background. I was an only child. My parents were only children. My father was a priest, my mother was a social worker. And we were just a neat family unit of 3 people. You have to think back to 1950. So we're talking Father Brown era, Miss Marple and St. Mary Meads. Ladies wore rather strange hats and went around on bicycles. So you can see how old I really am. But lessons have to be learnt from a fairly early age. And for the first 4 years of my life, I lived in splendid isolation. There was a housekeeper, but my parents were fairly busy. And I didn't really find it difficult being on my own. What I did find difficult was the day I had to go to school. Because if you live on your own and you're an only child, queuing, sharing, being competitive, and sort of understanding sibling rivalry and affection is something you have no experience of. So my first day at school was an absolute disaster. I hated every minute. I was terrified of the noise and the other children. And when they said at the end of the day, we'll see you tomorrow, I said, I'm afraid you won't, because I can't cope with all the other people. How my mother got me through the door the next day and broke the news slowly that I was going to be going to school until I was 18, I have no idea. But what I am going to say is that I still enjoy my own company, so lockdown wasn't as difficult for me as it could be for other people. One of the things I thought I'd do was get some jigsaws from the charity shop, which I did. And 3 weeks in, I was really annoyed. I decided I didn't like jigsaws at all. When my children said, how are you getting on with the jigsaws, Mum? I said, I hate them. I don't know what made me think I liked them. And they said, well, we don't know why you always had one on the go in school holidays. We didn't like them either. All we wanted to do was sit on the floor and watch movies and play computer games like our friends, but you made us do jigsaws and parlour games. So just shows you I didn't know myself, and I didn't even know my children. But loneliness and solitude, there's a huge difference. I enjoy solitude. I was an only child and I got used to it at an early age. But a lot of my friends found the lockdown very difficult because they found their own company rather difficult to cope with.
Mm. Yes, it's so interesting when you speak to so many different people. Everybody is experiencing this differently, and for some it is solitude and carrying on their life without very many changes, but to others it's such a huge change to get used to. It's quite anxiety inducing for some, isn't it? But it's good to know how you experience it and to realize that and acknowledge it, and yeah, move forward. So moving forward, how getting organized, how does that figure as part of your
yes, well,
mechanisms?
In challenging times, I think it does help to be organised, particularly if you're looking after other people. And as a carer, I had to look after Mark for 12 years. It comes naturally to me, but some other people find it really quite difficult. But I think the answer is to make your strategy simple and make sure that it works for you. Going into lockdown, I had the most complicated schedule. It was a bit like a school timetable. I had every minute of the day accounted for. And I had this incredible OCD moment where I had to clean the flat every 5 minutes. I went through more Sillet Blanc in the first 2 weeks than I had in a whole year. And I wondered, I was fixated on the underside of taps. Why did I care what was on the underside of my taps? But it really was important. Anyway, after a few weeks, that all faded. And my schedule was consigned to the dustbin. But I think being organised does help. If you're a lark, as I am, I like getting up early in the morning and going for a walk on the beach. Other people are owls, and they can work very, very effectively until about 2 or 3 in the morning. I have a friend who was interested by my getting up early and walking on the beach, and she said she'd try it, but she realised she was an owl, and she said it was hopeless because by 2 o'clock in the afternoon she was fast asleep on the sofa, and it didn't do her any good at all. So I think you need to work to your personal strengths. And timekeeping is terribly important, particularly if you're a carer. Certainly in the years of looking after Mark, we had sort of medication to deal with. And when you get up to 930 pills a month that he had to swallow, which is 31 a day, you realize that you've got to sort of keep your eye on things. Otherwise you miss out on dosages. And for someone who didn't really enjoy swallowing, that was certainly fun and games. But in between those times, obviously, schedules could be relaxed. So whether you're working from home or where you're working, I think it's a good idea if you know what day it is. If you enjoy being in your onesie until 4 o'clock in the afternoon, well, that's fine. But do make sure you're nice to yourself and have some comforting breaks. And whatever breaks up the day for you, if it is sort of sherry on your cornflakes or a glass of wine at lunchtime, whatever works. I was so tired by the end of the day while I was caring for Mark that I found the best thing of the day was getting into bed with Lord Peter Wimsey, because, you know, Dorothy Sayers is such a good writer. So people were rather surprised about that, particularly young ones who didn't know who Lord Peter Wimsey was. But there we go. Get organised because it helps. Okay.
Absolutely, and it's good to. I love what you say about being a lark or a night owl. I don't know if you've seen the image on that's going around social media. But I feel I'm in the middle ground of that permanently exhausted pigeon who's neither lark nor owl, but just permanently exhausted.
I like that one, permanently exhausted pigeon. Great.
And I suppose that would bring us on to your next point, I guess, is the importance of the smile and humour, I guess.
Yes, smiling and humour. Well, it costs nothing to smile and it does lift the spirits. And if you're going through tough times, I think that's terribly important. During lockdown, I was determined to find something beautiful and something funny each day, and keeping a sense of humour too. You can even be smiling when you're talking to someone on the phone or when you're writing an email or a letter. And I know I did get caught out a bit on those video calls right in the beginning. Having to brush my hair before I dare pick up the phone was ridiculous. But then on the other hand, there were some of those Zoom meetings where you looked around at the other people and you thought you were amongst a collection of the glums. Why couldn't they smile when they were listening to you? But some of them looked a bit sad. But I think really it is important to keep your spirits up. I've become a bit of a diarist since I left professional writing, because it started when our daughter was in the army and she did 2 tours in Afghanistan. And she said, really, letter writing is the thing that keeps us going. And she said, we love it when I get your letters. So I made them quite funny. And at the time, we were living next to a cathedral. And I must say that if you're living next to a cathedral, there's a lot going on and you can always find something to laugh at. So my letters were full of fun. She apparently was laughing out loud when she read one evening, and then all her colleagues said, what's going on? Please read it out to us. So I didn't realize that in the end, the entire mess was sitting there helpless with giggles. So I was single-handedly maintaining morale at Camp Bastion at one point. So I think humor helps. There's a quick story about a friend of mine who I meet on the beach each morning. Her name's Vicky. And I asked her one day if she was having a good day, and she said, no, it's very busy, I've got to fetch my father from hospital. I said, oh dear, has he had the coronavirus? She said, no, she said, he's got Parkinson's. So I said, okay, I can beat you there, I know a bit about that. She said, well, she said, the other day he decided he was going to try out his power saw. He picked it up with the wobbly hand and proceeded to almost sever the good hand. So she said, he's been in hospital for 3 weeks. And she said, he's, coming out now. I said, well, I think the first thing is probably to ban him from B&Q. And she said, God, I'm so cross with him. She said, I'm going to do a bit more than that. I'm going to take anything that looks a little bit sharp out of his shed and lock it up. So one has a laugh, even though it's in adversity, because I do think that, you know, it just helps. So we meet on the beach and discuss the vagaries of people with Parkinson's.
Oh, and I bet that's a comfort for her to be able to share that with you, and knowing with your experience of looking after.
Yeah.
Yeah. So being kind, why does that figure as one of your 10 life lessons? How important do you think that is, especially at the moment with everything we're going through?
That came about really sort of on the back of last week, Carers Week, when I was thinking of, you know, helping other people, and how as a carer or a parent or a writer or whoever you are, at some point or other in your life, you have been in a situation where you've had to look after other people. And it's a huge responsibility and requires a lot of selflessness. I'm sure the statistics I got from last week, 6.5 million carers in the UK, right? And I think I found out that there were 700,000 young carers under 18s. Now that is quite phenomenal. And you think of those young people who've probably got a lifetime of caring ahead of them. For goodness sake, they, you know, all of those people, big claps to them, because they do an amazing job. The selflessness and all the heroes and heroines of lockdown, you know, the key workers and things like that, really brought it home to me last week, just how amazing people are. Then when it comes to my generation, the older people, we're also, you know, quite a generous bunch because we're quite good at volunteering. And when I was trying to explain why it's quite important to be a volunteer, I know it's important if you're paid money to do a good job, but there's a difference between being involved and being committed. If you're an employee or you're paid to do something, you need to think about the difference between the chicken and the pig. The chicken is involved in the production of an egg. But if you think about it, the pig is committed to the production of bacon. So I think I'm a pig because I've done quite a lot of volunteering in my time, and it's a good way of remembering it. Giving is empowering, and it can be done in lots of ways. I volunteer for Parkinson's UK. I give talks and I write bits and pieces for them. But I think pat on the back time for the Society of Authors, not only the Carers Network, the Writers as Carers Group. In my darkest hours, you were an enormous amount of help and support to me, and I can't thank you enough for all of that. Parkinson's UK also were marvellous. And can I just say a big clap for Society of Authors local groups. I'm fortunate in that I belong to the Brighton and Worthing group. Wonderful people, Emma Cameron and her friend Anna, who also assists in the meetings. When I attend the meetings, which was pre-lockdown, always crept in and sat at the back because everybody else is so much more talented and impressive than I am. But I do enjoy it. And they've got a Zoom meeting at 2 o'clock on Saturday. Hope to be with you. But thank you, all of you, for being so kind and generous. And yes, there are a lot of wonderful people about. It's a pleasure to have got to know you all.
I've been really impressed by how the local groups have been able to transfer their activities online and use Zoom, which is new to us all, and we're all getting used to it at varying levels, but to be able to carry on and to keep the connection going during times when we all are forced to be apart has been so vital for lots of members of the SOA, but the local groups particularly have picked that up and are having those regular meetings now more and more, just so that local members in small numbers can get together and just share their own experiences and getting back to writing, which people seem now to be able to do. And I was just talking to a member beforehand on our Writers as Carers group chat, and she's been loving the solitude that the lockdown has brought, because it's enabled her to in fact do more writing than normal. And that's not the case for everybody. It is, everyone has different circumstances, but there's a little silver lining there for some.
Absolutely.
So, choices. Number 5.
Oh, yes. Good one. Making your own decisions, backing your own judgment. You know, quite often you're wiser and more experienced than the people who are giving you advice. So wasn't it Oscar Wilde who said that the only thing to do with good advice was to pass it on to other people because it was absolutely of no use to himself. I think maybe you don't need to rush into something just because somebody else thinks it's a good idea. I was given a piece of advice some years ago, which I certainly think is true. When you've got one foot in the grave, it's a good idea to have the other one on a bus route. Well, I moved to the middle of the city, and it's been much more sensible than living as I had at times, you know, in a house in the country in the middle of a field. So making sure that as we get older, the choices are ours and that we are involved in the decision-making process. Another thing is not to make a decision in an emotional state. Well, retirement, redundancy, divorce, bereavement, all of those things. Maybe sometimes doing nothing is a good thing. However, I must just tell you the story of Mark's choice. He decided before he died that he wanted to give his body to medical research. So we went through all the paraphernalia of filling in the forms. And when the time came, he was going to Southampton University. So when I had to make that phone call, I got in touch and they said, oh, they're terribly sorry, but they had rather a lot of bodies and they didn't need any donations at that moment. So rather than taking no for an answer, I said, oh, can you bring some of your mates in other university medical schools, see if you can find a space for him somewhere? Well, the kind doctor did his best, but the answer was no. So he said, I'm afraid it's going to be plan B, Mrs. K, which is great if you have a plan B, but we didn't have a plan B. So we had to rein in the co-op who did their thing. So the next choice was they got in touch with me and said, it's all done. Now, do you want him back? And I said, well, yes, but in somewhat concentrated form, if that's okay. And sure, it was the end of November, beginning of December. I had just moved into a new flat. This gentleman turned up with a very discreet silver bag with what looked like a rather posh biscuit tin in it. And I was just taking possession of this. And one of my new neighbours came out into the hallway and she said, oh, Frances, how lovely. You've got an early Christmas present. And just without thinking, I said, oh, no, that's not a Christmas present. That's my husband. Well, she's just about talking to me now. And it was 18 months ago. So just be careful what you say. I didn't mean to shock her. I thought we were going to need a defibrillator at one point. Anyway, there you go. Choices. Make sure you make wise ones.
Wonderful. That's really lovely. So with an eye on the time, age and growing older, number 6.
Yeah. Got to be quick. Yeah. Okay. Shouldn't regret going older. It's a privilege denied to many. Perhaps you remember the VE Day, 75th anniversary celebrations recently. Gosh, lots of people given their lives when they were very, very young. And yeah, you've only got to hear a whiff of Elgar's Nimrod and I'm in floods of tears. So there we go. That was a very moving moment. But at 70 years of age, we were suddenly confined to our own homes in lockdown. So going in a, you know, one day from being a hands-on granny to a social pariah and a health hazard. I found that a bit tricky, but hadn't realised, in fact, that I had 4 carers. They are called adult children. Think of Eric Byrne and his transactional analysis, the adult-child-parent thing. My goodness, the phone didn't stop ringing. Mother, are you all right? Have you got any food? What are you going to do? What are you eating stuff that's out of the sell-by date? And I said, for goodness sake, do you want an iPad? I said, look, I can't work the toaster hardly in the kitchen. The last thing I need is an iPad. Anyway, finally they calmed down. But my point is that there is a lot of grey power around. So when suddenly we were sort of over 70s written off and told we had to sort of hide away for 12 weeks, I think members of my granny gang and my merry widows were all a bit sort of aghast. We hadn't realised that we were a disposable or dangerous being. I think now that we've got to the bubble stage, that's even more of a shock. I had 12 weeks of splendid isolation, doing exactly what I wanted. And suddenly my daughter rings up and says, you've got to join my bubble. And I said, well, hang on a minute. And she said, you're not going to choose one of my brothers over me. And I said, no, it's not that. I was thinking of asking my hairdresser to come and share my flat because I need a haircut. So she took a bit of umbrage. But anyway, I am in her bubble. And as from tomorrow, I'm back on fatigue. So there we go. But yes, going older isn't bad. it's a good idea to sort of be a listener, be able to enjoy doing one thing at a time. You can dump this multitasking, which is just ridiculous. And I think I'm happy becoming an observer rather than a participant.
Mm-hmm. And did you find that coming that gradually, or that coming to that position of changing roles, or has that been something that you've a lockdown observation become? Oh,
I think it came on gradually because looking after Mark, I had to dump an awful lot of stuff. There was very little that we could actually do. I was looking after him, and so when I emerged into widowhood, it was a matter of, well, you know, nobody needs me. Nobody is depending on me. I can be a sort of free spirit, and I just got used to sort of looking around and enjoying seeing things. I'll move on to point 7 because we're running short of time. You know, noticing things because you're not so busy. You can see sort of beauty in things. I love my early morning walks and love looking at clouds and things like that. I love listening to things. When it was quiet in lockdown, I actually heard swans, the wings beating. They fly in a perfect V formation. It's absolutely wonderful. And it was so quiet, I could hear it. Then touching things, well, I couldn't touch the grandchildren, so I had to make do with cashmere sweaters and silk pashminas. But then, hey, you know, and the smells, you know, lovely walking past shops now where they're doing takeaway coffees, you can smell that. And of course, living near the sea, there's a lot of fish and chips that are now being sold. That's a good smell. So really seeing beauty in unexpected places. I notice something different every day when I go for a walk. And my beach walks are full of surprises, including one day when I was sitting on a rock, removing a stone from my shoe. I realized there was somebody standing quite near me. When I glanced up, it was a gentleman who was actually in his birthday suit. He was standing there, and I think he wanted a bit of a reaction from me. But I mean, there weren't many other people about because it was only 8 o'clock in the morning. Anyway, as I didn't take much notice, he sort of stomped into the sea, and I was able to admire his firm, fairly fantastic pair of buttocks. But what amused me about this was the fact that about 2 weeks later, an email came in from the Hampshire Constabulary and the Neighbourhood Watch saying what they've been doing to keep us safe during lockdown. And the last paragraph was, anybody seen some bloke, you know, naked bather in the beach area? And I thought, oh, that's my fellow. So I got in touch and transpired that, yes, they wanted a witness statement and various other things. And they thought that maybe if it got to court, they might need me to do an identity parade. And I said, oh, no, not a line of naked men. I really can't cope with that. They said, it's much easier nowadays. You just look at photographs on a computer screen. So then I said, well, hang on. If you're going to show me heads and shoulders, that's useless. The only bit of his anatomy I've seen close up is something completely different. So the children are now dining out on the story that mother is helping the Hampshire police with their inquiries. So just be careful.
There you go. There's some
there you go.
material for a story in that. Oh, goodness. So has that been good for your health?
Well, yes. Is it good for your health? I don't know. I certainly think that ill health and disease are a misfortune. But then if you can't do anything about it, you've got to get on with it. And so attitude matters. You can't choose what happens to you, but you can choose how you deal with it. And you can choose between denial and acceptance, surviving rather than suffering, being a victim or a victor. And I think that was the sort of lesson I learned maybe the hard way over the 12 years. Not saying I had a difficult time. I mean, 12 years is nothing, a very light sentence compared to what other people deal with. But yeah, you have to deal with dark clouds and try and find silver linings. And of course, it was the fact Mark and I had a lot of quality time together, which we wouldn't have had otherwise because we'd have been rushing around doing things and not being together. When it got really tricky, a friend of mine who's a professor of social work, she said, Frances, I think your life is becoming somewhat Kafkaesque. And then I said, well, I don't know about that. And I sent her some extracts from my night watch diary, which was the worst possible time. And she said, I revised that. She said, actually, your life makes Kafka look like Walt Disney. So you can see how bad it got. But I mean, I did get through it. I wrote the diary from diagnosis to death, the qualms of a carer, Parkinson's UK abuse, this of that. And I think that carers can be in lockdown with mental health issues because their responsibilities are so onerous. Beware of over-promising and under-delivering, which I did. I fell into that. Mark said, only you. In the last 6 weeks of his life, he spent in a nursing home, and I really did feel like Judas Iscariot. But when someone asks you, when you're caring, how you are, if you reply, I'm fine, do remember that stands for fragile, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. But we got through.
And you'd written a lovely article for our carers newsletter about that, didn't you? And we shared the guide with members of the network when that article went out. So I don't know if that would be available again. We can put it on the website, or we can share it with anyone. If anyone specifically is going through some things to your caring role, we can share that guide with them, because it's an amazing resource to have. It's
not all doom and gloom. There are some funny bits. A couple of my friends who are retired GPs said, thank goodness you put some humour into it, because otherwise, you know. So yes, there are a few laughs along the way.
That's a wonderful thing.
How are we doing for time?
There's always lots of humour in your conversations, which I love. We're at 3:30, so I think you've got 2 more points you wanted to go through, and then we'll go to questions.
Just 2 more points, yeah. Can we go for the kiss? Yeah? Keeping it simple? Keeping it simple, sweetheart. Yeah, I certainly think that was forced on us with COVID-19, because suddenly there was a lot of things that we couldn't do. I think simpler lives are better, but then a lot of other people disagree. I think less is more. I think minimalism is great. I don't like being a Klingon, although I have friends who keep every single last piece of paper, and they have their children's school reports from the age of 4. Goodness knows why, but they do, and that matters to them. Great. But I like the William Morris thing, which is you don't need anything in your home except what is either beautiful or you consider to be useful. And I think the Marie Kondo book on decluttering is marvelous, and Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos, that was quite good. But letting go can be liberating, and we had no choice in lockdown except to let things go, and I had no choice but to let things go as my husband's illness progressed. Ditching things can save a lot of time. I mean, one of my sons, I said, how are you doing with this lockdown bit? He said, well, I've gained 3 hours a day because I don't have to commute to the office. So, you know, there's always a sort of plus if you can find it. And I think that the only thing that I can say, some people find it difficult to cope when things shut down. I have friends who suffer from FOMO, fear of missing out. Yeah? Yep. Well, I don't. I suffer from FOOP, which is fear of other people. Now, you know that because I'm an only child, but I really got the FOOPs. And I said, Emma, my daughter rang up and she said, what's the matter? I said, well, I can't go out because I said, you know, there are going to be other people out there and I don't know where they've been. What am I going to do? And she said, oh, don't be ridiculous. So the only thing to do is to use the networking rule, which is when people can't walk into a room full of strangers, force yourself to speak to 5 sort of people a day, which is easy for me for the walking. Dog walkers are quite a safe bet. You know, I don't always accost naked men, promise you I don't, really. But, you know, there are 1 or 2 people on the beach that I now chat to, and it's wonderful. And I sometimes come back and I think, well, no, I'm not a FOOP anymore. But maybe 1 or 2 people have felt like that, because I certainly thought that was going to be a big problem. Anyway, we can move on to wisdom, all right? Last thing, coping tips. I think it was the Archbishop of Canterbury, the late one, Michael Ramsey, who was asked to define wisdom, and he said it was the ability to cope. And that's, I think, pretty sensible. However, there's another one. Once you reach a certain stage in life, this is for the ladies, you have the face that you deserve. Now, Coco Chanel said that. Now, she didn't mince her words, did she? For goodness sake. So a face can tell a story and reel the past. And I think in terms of self-caring, we all deserve to be the best possible versions of ourselves. And experience and the way we deal with things, you know, becomes our visual identity. So life is about coping strategies, and there aren't any golden rules because everybody has their own methods and their own ways of surviving. But if we want to effect a change, we need to keep moving. Jolly difficult to achieve anything while we're standing still. And I think with the Parkinson's rules, which I gave a talk to, you know, how to cope as a carer, you need to be able to adapt in order to survive, and you need a good attitude and a degree of organisation. So yeah, I've got through lockdown. I looked after Mark, and I think now with coronavirus hopefully sort of on the way out, I'll be able to emerge once again and enjoy life. But I know I could have done better. But what lessons have the listeners learned from lockdown or life as we approach our new normal? I'll be very interested to hear. Thank you.
Thank you, Frances. That was a lovely whip through of 10 life lessons learned. What I will say, just from a technical point of view, there may be a slight delay on any questions coming through, but please, if you're listening and you have any questions that you'd like to ask Frances, specifically or generally about caring and writing and how writing through lockdown, we'll wait for those to come through, and we'll just have a bit of general conversation while we get any questions. And I'm just checking that I've got the chat box there in front of me, which we do. What do you have any plans with Parkinson's UK for any further work? Because I know you've been giving talks, workshops to their social care students about caring. Have you got any further plans to work with them again?
I've done a bit with Parkinson's UK, and it's rather down to them as to how they're organising their next sort of sessions. It'll probably be on the Zoom or something like that. Bournemouth University, again, they have gone back to learning online, and so I've written stuff for them. But it's mainly you guys, Parkinson's UK and Carers UK if they want me. But anybody I can be of use to, I'm happy to share my experiences, because it is very important to come out of it without too many battle scars. And you know, it wasn't all bad, but it was tricky at times, and you don't get a roadmap, you don't get an instruction book with disease, so everybody has it different.
I think that's what we find with the carers group. It's a small group, but we do get new joiners coming along every few months, and it's so valuable for experienced carers to be able to share what they've learned to carers who are just maybe starting out as a carer, new to caring. And because there are lots of organisations like Carers UK, like Carers Trust, like the specific charities and organisations that look after the particular illnesses, but carers themselves having that kind of peer-to-peer support where you can just go into a safe space, you know, it's only other carers, and just to ask the questions that you don't dare ask others, or share things that you don't want to share necessarily with the health professionals who are dealing with your loved one or with your particular situation. Yes. I think it's been a valuable support group for the last 5 years that it's been going to help
absolutely
us, and also to help to try and keep writing, try and keep creative, and you've written guides and diaries throughout, and I'd love to see those published because they are hilarious, having read them.
Do you really want the Merry Widows one, the gap year one, when I emerged from my widowhood and sort of restarted my life? That's quite funny. But the in Purda in Portsmouth, that is very funny, because we have had some interesting experiences over the last 3 months. Yeah.
Well, we do have a question which I'll go to, just so that I'm asking attendee questions. What about money worries? With no work and no recourse to funds from government, it's difficult not to worry about the future and to be in the present moment. So one of the attendees is wondering how people are building things to help them be sustainable in the future, or at least to feel a bit better about it at the moment when finances might be looking very bleak indeed.
Yes, I've been through some tough times. In terms of money worries, the sort of flippant answer is I've never had any money worries, because I've never had any money. But in actual fact, it is difficult, and certainly having to give up work to become a carer was tough. And I think I remember the savings sort of hemorrhaging out of my bank account at enormous speed. But then I was quite good at finding charities and ways of making bits of money that got us through. And then finally realizing that as a carer, we didn't have a lot to do. So consequently, we could live on a lot less than when I was actually trying to maintain a working life in London. I do think there are ways of surviving. But I don't think I'm the person that best qualified to advise you now on what the government handouts are and what the latest policy. I am not an economist or an accountant, and I would just say there will be sources out there that will help you. Don't give up, and it is amazing. You will work your way through this minefield.
Because you have to do a lot of work, ask a lot of questions, do a lot of research, finding out what pots of monies are available and where and what the application windows are, because getting in early sometimes can be good for an application because they might have finite periods where you can apply for different funding pots. Certainly on the SOA website, we've got our the COVID-19 resources page for different pots of funding available to writers, illustrators, literary translators, some through Arts Council England, others through our own Authors Emergency Fund, which is going to be open hopefully till the end of the year, and that doesn't have a specific funding window, and writers, illustrators, script writers, translators can apply for up to £2,000 and put an application in. And if you're not successful on the first round, what I would say to anyone listening is do apply again. You can apply again, I think, and Francesca will correct me in the background if I'm wrong, but after 3 months you can apply again. So yes, there is the SOA fund. I know funds will be limited and few and far between, but keep asking, and email us if you have, but I'm just thinking to this member for their specific question, email in to us and we can see what areas of funding we know about and we'll share with you, and if they're not on the website already. And looking at different ways of making money in these times, I think everyone, if as a writer, if that's their sole source of income, it's looking for other ways to make money when so many avenues have been shut down at the moment. So it is very difficult times for writers, and we're going to be looking to keep our fundraising going so that we can keep our emergency fund open to those that need it most. So yes, we will try and keep that resources page as up to date as possible. We've got another question. I've got an eye on the questions. So, a few coming in. So, any suggestions for dealing with? Sorry, that was half a question. I shall. Another question coming in. We've Kogan Page has been your publisher throughout your publishing career, Francis. Have you or others published in any form whilst being a carer? So have you been able to publish work whilst you were caring for Mark? This lady's cared for her mother and she has only managed to publish one thing during that time as a carer, and only had one reader, her mother, oh bless, who didn't give it a good review. So we join the carers group and you'd get lots of supportive comments there. But how did you find writing whilst caring, and did you manage to get anything published through that process?
Apart from the editing of the Good Retirement Guide, which I had to stop in the end because my brain wasn't working, I didn't attempt to write. And so that's why I transferred into the diary stuff, because eventually that may be converted into Haglit as opposed to Chicklit. Who knows? I've just been sort of tinkering around with stuff. No, I didn't have the capacity, the strength, the energy to do with it. My husband was a 24-hour care job, and I'm afraid I let the actual professional writing slide after I said goodbye to Kogan Page. Sorry, can't help.
I think that's what we heard as well last week from Kate Moss, in that it took somebody else stepping in to kind of say, don't try to finish this deadline, meet this deadline, because when you're in the midst of it and if you've got various caring roles and things are hard and you want to try and finish those deadlines, often you want to keep going and try to do everything, and until somebody else steps in and goes, no, you can't do this caring has to be your primary focus for the moment, and then things change and you can get back to writing when the caring role lessens, perhaps.
Yes, I think it was a case of multitasking was not for me. Rather than doing two things badly, it was better to try and do one thing well. And I'm afraid that's where the writing went down out and the caring took over. But it was still satisfying, and I felt I did best a job as I could.
I think similar to caring and lockdown is just as one attendee points out, just the mental saturation of caring or just trying to get through a day during lockdown is it means that you can't concentrate to anything creative and like writing. So it can be very hard to summon any concentration or energy.
It can. I had a system which I called the 5C system for Mark. It was to keep him calm, to keep him clean, to keep him clothed, to keep him comfortable, food and drink, and to keep him contented. I couldn't always tick off all 5, but I felt if I'd done most of those, I could then, when he was asleep, you know, get back doing something that I wanted to do. But whatever works for you, whether or not you need little breaks or you need a slug of time where someone else can take over for a while, just find a method that makes you feel less burdened, I suppose. It's terribly difficult. There is no golden rule. Just have to find your own way through the rather rocky path.
Thank you. Well, we've had our own slug of time today. It's we're approaching 3:45, so I shall draw things to a close here. Thank you everybody for your questions to Frances, and thank you very much, Frances, for joining us this afternoon. It's been absolutely lovely to spend time with you talking today, and to all our listeners for chroming and popping by with a cuppa to have a natter with Frances. If anyone's interested in finding out more about the carers group, there's details on the website. Or drop me an email and I can add you to our list. We've left the link to the Authors Emergency Fund up there because the fundraising is going to continue because authors are going to need it as a result of this health crisis. So just a few closing points. Tomorrow in the festival, we'll be chatting with the founder of the inaugural Queen's Nicholas Award, the children's author Nicholas Allen, whose award is based on the book of the same name. And on Thursday, it's a big week, it's the 2020 Society of Authors Awards. So we announce this year's winners on Thursday from 10 AM, I think, with a series of short online videos throughout the day because we can't have a physical event this year, but we'll still have our glad rags on. And in the afternoon at 4, we'll be joined by the author and Waterstone's Children's Laureate Cressida Cowell on the same day, and so she'll be popping in for afternoon tea to share in our excitement. So if you haven't registered for those events, you can still sign up for those on the website, and if you can't watch them live, then they will be available later on our Vimeo channel as well. So thank you once again to Frances for joining us this afternoon. If you do have any questions, you can email us at the Society of Authors, or you can join in on Twitter using the hashtag #SOA@home. So thank you all for joining us and see you again soon.
Thank you. Bye.